Now let's shift focus to one space which has been growing leaps and bounds, and according to most analysts has potential to grow up to almost $1 trillion by value by 2030. We're talking about nothing other than the SaaS ecosystem in India. So let's try and understand what really is the potential for SaaS, what is the regulatory environment looking like, what are the growth opportunities, and more importantly, what's the investment environment as well looking for this particular segment in the market, given the kind of growth potential that it has. Let me welcome on board a panel of experts that we've curated together today. We have with us Monish Darda, the co-founder and CTO at Icertis. We also have Rajaraman Santhanam, the co-founder and CEO at Chargebee, Manav Garg, CEO and founder at Eka Software Solutions and founding partner at SaaSBoomi Together Fund. And we also have with us Karan Mohla, the partner at Chiratae Ventures India Advisors, joining in on the show. Gentlemen, great to have you all on the show. Thanks so much for taking the time out. As we're trying to really understand what exactly does the SaaS ecosystem bring about. Karan, if I could start the discussion with you. Today, about 55 to 60% of global IT and operation workflows are delivered from India. How exactly do you think India can build forward when it comes to the SaaS ecosystem sitting in India?
Sure. No, I think that's a great way to start. I think there's a few things which have really developed over the last 3 to 4 years, specifically around SaaS and enterprise tech. I think one was obviously a lot of global tech centers were set up here by the IT services companies and then by the software product companies in the 2010s. That's obviously led to a lot of talent, and I think the second part is what folks like Manav and others have done with SaaSBoomi is really create the community around founders, product managers, engineers, and help develop that talent. And I think that the third part is India offers 2-3 things. One is just the talent, the ability to service customer support literally 24 hours a day, which is a big inherent advantage. And the fact that we've been doing this for IT services for decades now. So all those things have come together. What I think the tipping point really has been on the product side. These are all world-class products today, and also the ability to pay largely is with clients in North America, clients in Europe, partially in the APAC region, mostly in Japan and Australia. And those delivery models have been understood for decades, like I said, right? So I think all these things coming together has really led for a perfect storm in many ways. And on the funding side, I'd probably say that a lot of global VCs who are in India, folks like us who were set up from the ground up, understood the earlier software license model and then the transition into SaaS. And I think putting this together is what really made this happen in a very meaningful way. One sort of led to the other, and then it's a snowballing effect, right? So I think a lot of credit should go to the earlier folks who were in the license model, then transitioned into SaaS, and you see the talent that's come out of a lot of the pioneers. I think that's the point which is incredibly encouraging for VC investors, and then that establishes the supply chain from angel investors, all the way up to growth stage investors. And look at what MindTickle's done as one example, right? The most recent unicorn, as far as I can remember, as a SaaS company from India, and they're one of I think 5 or 6 at this point. But my count may be off, given how quickly these things are developing.
Rightly put, Karan. Manav, if I could get you into the discussion, what is it that you're making of the SaaS ecosystem in India and the growth potential? I was just scanning through a couple of reports, and one of them reads that pure play SaaS companies in India are expected to reach about almost $18 to $20 billion in revenues by 2025, wherein the current rate is at about $3 billion.
Yeah, so I think that's the work we did at SaaSBoomi. We partnered with McKinsey to do a little bit more data backup study, and that's how we came to a number of about $50 to $60 billion by the end of 2030 in terms of SaaS revenues. But let me step back and give you a little bit, there's a massive tailwind which we are seeing, which is globally happening in software space, which is now SaaS, where a lot of revenue or adoption has moved from a traditional enterprise software to actually the cloud software. And that's that's a wave which actually got accelerated almost by 10x, as what Satya says from Microsoft, in the last 18 months during pandemic. So it is that the wave which India is also beginning to ride. And India is in a good position to do that because, we have been working for last, I would say, a decade or so, painstakingly fixing, making global products for India. Like Karan said, now we are seeing global products being built in India. And then we started focusing on, go-to-market, which is what is beginning to work now, early stages of that. So therefore, there's a lot of fundamental, elements along with the tailwind, which has come together to put us into this opportunity. But let me tell you, I think what is the most encouraging sign and what excites me most is India's right to win. So I think the biggest narrative shift in India's right to win, in addition to the availability of talent, services, everything is actually shift to digital go-to-market. Now sitting in India, and we have seen the companies in SME space as well as enterprise, which means from a $1,000 deal to $1 million plus deal, you can do all sitting in India. Yes, it may not remain the same going forward, but primarily we're seeing a massive shift from a percentage of go-to-market which you can execute from India, which is remotely now. So what we are projecting through this report is that about 80% of go-to-market could be executed sitting in India. So that is going to give us a huge flip. And then when you add it to the post-sale service as well, which is a key part of SaaS ecosystem, where your customer success, not just the support, but customer success function also can be leveraged sitting in India. I think these two is a perfect harmony for Indian companies to scale. Obviously, the limiting factor is going to be the talent availability. Actually, today we're already seeing that attrition is sky high. Companies are trending upwards of 20% of attrition right now. It's very hard to find still engineering talent, and even harder the inside sales and marketing talent. But I think overall we are poised for growth because of massive tailwind and global adoption across SME and enterprise of the SaaS softwares.
Right. Let me go across now to Rajaraman, the co-founder and CEO of Chargebee. We have 8 SaaS unicorns that started from India. Chargebee is one of them. Welcome to the show. What I want to begin by asking Rajaraman, and picking up from what is just being discussed while you're tackling problems of attrition. Engineer is now king. You're seeing crazy salaries, super bikes, Mercedes, that is all being thrown out at them. The bigger question I want to ask you is that when you build for the world, sitting from India, how big is the opportunity? The sense I'm trying to get at is, are we at an inflection point where these SaaS companies can be the future TCS, Infosys, Wipros?
Yeah, definitely. The service is the new SaaS for especially from India. So we have done extremely well in India, and that built a lot of talent pool. In terms of, we have been doing it for several years to companies outside of India, in the US and Europe. Now the entire talent is looking to do the same thing from India. And I'll touch upon some of the points that Manav also mentioned. So one of the advantage when you start from India is from day one, you don't specifically start focusing in one geo. Because you're selling from India, you start focusing on both US and Europe very similarly, right? Unlike a company in the US and Europe, they typically start out with focusing on one geo. The advantage in India also gives an ability to focus on multiple geos at the same time. For some of the businesses in India, there's a healthy revenue coming from both US and Europe. I think that's one of the excellent advantage. And the ability to sell from here into the Europe is also an amazing advantage with the easier time zone, all of those aspects also. That's one of the observations that we have made talking to a lot of people. And second one is, in terms of opportunity, a lot of services companies are also looking to productize their offering and transition into a SaaS. We have a couple of customers that we encountered, like there's a company called Rev.com, which has been doing a lot of services to medias and communications to subtitle and dubbing. Suddenly they have built an API layer to their service and offered it as a SaaS. So that's a new opportunity that all these services companies are also seeing to transition into a SaaS company that's fast tracking most of these opportunities and market size.
Monish, welcome. So let's talk a little bit about how big is the opportunity. I know that SaaSBoomi is having a press conference and releasing a report next week to discuss all of that. But how big is the opportunity? And once again, I'll ask you exactly what my previous question was. Is it big enough for India to produce the next Wipro, TCS, Infosys? Is that how big it is globally?
I think this is actually a very good metaphor. Neeraj Chopra got gold. We never thought, in all of India's history in athletics, in javelin, kind of, the transition that's happened, that transition is also happening in enterprise SaaS in my mind. I think that opportunity from now on is so huge. I think we have to now think of beyond the Infosys and the Wipros and think about Salesforce, think about Coupa, think about these enterprise SaaS companies that have moved the world and where the enterprise ecosystem actually works with these companies. So not just building, not just the services side, but how do you actually get product revenue into the country? How do you actually not just build in India, not just sell from India, but also make sure that that market that is in India expands globally. And you create new opportunities, you create new categories. For us in Icertis, we very immodestly, actually, we did end up redefining the CLM category. And the CLM category is the fifth system of record in any enterprise in the world. So if you can build those companies, I think this becomes, not a, decacorn, not a $20 billion valuation. We and the ecosystem and the enterprise SaaS ecosystem, especially in India, can now aspire for, $100 billion valuation. I think that's where the market is. That's how big the market and the opportunity in my mind is. And it's also fueled, just to add two things, it's also fueled by the young population, the existing market, and the cost to actually try out stuff in the Indian ecosystem before you go hit globally. So I think all these things are coming together in our favor to make this really, really exciting. This is going to be the byte economy in India where SaaS actually takes the cake, in my mind.
Wow, okay, that sounds incredibly exciting. But I do want to come, Karan, to the other side of the spectrum, which is essentially the cost. And for companies like these, you're essentially talking about the cost of the workforce that will drive profitability, which in any cases is incredibly high, and why it's so attractive the world over. But having said that, at some point, do you, as an investor, look at companies that are more efficient and do companies that draw better talent at a better price then become much more competitive down the line? At some point, do you think that that's going to happen, consolidation very quickly?
So, there's a few ways of looking at it. And obviously what gets talked about most is salaries of technical talent. And look, that's a reality. But I think if you step back, there's two fundamental things which are very, very attractive about enterprise tech and SaaS. Very, very capital efficient companies, whether they're in India or the US. If you look at the share of VC-backed IPOs in the US, you look at what a Snowflake or a Palantir, which are really the poster child in very, very recent years, in the last 12 months. I think that gives you a sense of what's possible, like Monish was saying. Ultimately, to go back to what Manav mentioned, right, about how the sales delivery models have evolved a lot. It's definitely in the last 18 months. What he's talking about is very much a product-led approach, where you don't need the traditional enterprise model of feet on street to be able to sell. That cuts your costs dramatically. It has happened largely till now for vertical-led SaaS companies or vertically focused SaaS companies. It's starting to happen on slightly more horizontal, where they're not industry focused. It will accelerate for infrastructure software companies, right? Because there you're selling the nuts and bolts of basically building platforms for other companies. You don't need necessarily hundreds of people selling to customers in the US or in Europe. And what at least companies in the US have really mastered is the way and the art of selling through product as opposed to through a push sales model. And Indian companies or companies that have started in India have caught on very, very quickly. And the combination of a product-led approach combined with inside sales. To me, I think the talent for inside sales will be probably the next best, the next most talked about thing, because a good inside sales team can can expand profitability and your margins tremendously. So I think those are probably things to think about. But ultimately, it comes to the fact that, look, SaaS companies in general are very, very capital efficient. And hence you see, I think there's a very disproportionate share of SaaS companies, VC-backed SaaS companies that have gone public in the US and getting the valuations that they are because of the capital efficiencies. Yes, a few basis points here or there will go up because of cost, but ultimately when you're sitting on 80+% gross margins, trending to 90% in some cases, you do have margin leverage to play with. And that I think is very, very, not many people talk about this, but I think that's for public market stories, that's hugely important.
I mean, those 80% margins are exactly what I was alluding to when you say that these companies enjoy very, very high margins. But Manav, I want to come to you on this. It's clear that Indian companies are somewhat creating an edge for themselves in the kind of opportunity that is available and the kind of growth, as Karan was just pointing out, in the products that they are developing. But there are other places in the world that are also creating that edge. Globally, do you think that India will sustain and will create a moat for itself, or do you think at some point there will be increasing competition from overseas as well?
Yeah, sure. So let me give you a context first. When we are talking about reaching $1 trillion in market cap, or which is on the back of $50-60 billion of SaaS revenues, we're looking at only 6% of global SaaS revenue. So I think India today is about 1%. So I think India has a potential to reach 6%. So that's the biggest takeaway for the SaaS industry, is that it is not winners takes all market. Unlike a consumer internet, where there's only one Amazon, one Google, and Facebook, which starts dominating the world. In an enterprise software world or B2B world, there are multiple companies which can coexist. And while there's one Salesforce, so Salesforce, even after the most dominant, has about 20% market share in the CRM market. Rest 80% is all divided among various other small companies across various geographies and some niche areas in that space. So that gives you an idea that, so therefore, when we did that analysis, Indian companies or Indian entrepreneurs have almost more than 400 different domains which they can focus on. And when I talk about domains, these are horizontal application areas like, where Freshworks or Zoho, CRM, support, and also Icertis, which are more functional areas. And then there are vertical companies. Eka was in communities, now we moved to CFO office. Then similarly, there are companies which are now in digital healthcare, for example, they're coming up. The company who's focused on dental healthcare cleaning automation. There's a company where we have invested from the fund, which is focused on muscular health in the patients in the US. So there are multiple opportunities across vertical and horizontal. But the more importantly, where I personally think India can become a SaaS infrastructure for the world is DevTool. India has about 3 million developers, which is one of the largest markets in the world of developers. And as the SaaS companies grows, the infrastructure actually also grows at the faster pace, because to keep in demand with the cloud and storage and so many other things. So I think that is going to lend us, larger market share as we grow. But we only need 6% market share in this industry, which is not winners take all. And it is global in nature, as Rajaram was also saying that you can sell globally sitting in India. So therefore, there's a huge advantage across these vectors for India to take that market share. So I certainly believe there is a massive opportunity, but I will always say it with caution. I think talent is going to be a crunch. Current talk about inside sales talent, we're already seeing that's something where global companies are also now doing the same opportunity, right? So the threat is not going to only come from Indian entrepreneurs. We'll also see a lot of global MNCs putting up their base in India, because they will understand this playbook as we understand now. So I think that is where the maximum focus will go from an industry perspective.
Monish, I have a question coming for you in particular with regards to Icertis on my Twitter account. So I'm definitely going to take this one up. Someone wants to know, what exactly does your company do? I think for our viewers who don't understand the SaaS model, perhaps that would be a good classroom.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. Can you repeat the question if you don't mind?
Lost Aisha's feed over there, perils of live television. We're going to correct that, but I got a little sense of what Aisha was asking you Monish, so let me ask you that, some questions that are coming in. And, when we talk about SaaS, it is how hot it is, the kind of money that is coming in, the trillion-dollar opportunity that is there. Monish, one of the questions that came in is, what does Icertis exactly do? And, when you talk to some people, they're like, yeah, what is SaaS? Do you want to tell us what Icertis does?
So one thing, if you think about, a large enterprise function like selling or buying or leasing or hiring, you need systems that go across the board. And the way you pay for those systems traditionally, I think Manav also mentioned and Karan did, there was all enterprise kind of fixed license fees. And obviously the SaaS market changed that pricing model to be a more consumer and consumption based model. So you pay per user. So what we do is we take this fifth system of record that I talked about, contract lifecycle management, and we allow large corporations, like the top 3 companies, largest companies in the world use Icertis. We allow them to actually manage their contracting processes by using an enterprise SaaS pricing model, which is essentially, you pay for what you consume. You have a number of users, you have the contracts that you create, how do you create them and how do you put that together? So that service now, as opposed to a product that you give them and forget about, you manage the service, you manage the infrastructure, you manage the actual end user support as well, all of that, and you make sure that that service is delivered for a price. And what we do is that global transformation that companies are looking at in terms of, hey, how do I not just digitally transform, but also make sure that my business processes can be really agile? We make that happen in those companies. And which is very interesting because, a company's business, any enterprise that you take, there's dollars coming in and there's dollars going out. And every dollar that goes out of the company or comes into the company, there's always a contract behind it. Whether you're hiring, whether you're selling, whether you're buying, whether you're leasing, any nature, anything that connects to money actually goes back to a contract. And we manage that process for these large corporations. Hopefully, I answered that question for them.
Yeah, absolutely you did. Rajaraman, if I could get you in here, because, investors like Sequoia are saying that 2020, 2021 is the year of SaaS. Given that it's so hard, I'm curious to understand what's the funding environment looking like. I'm sure big bucks are chasing you guys.
Yeah, definitely. I'll let Karan also to chime in here. So, the funding situation is always, it's been great in the past few years, especially the past 1 year since the pandemic kicked in. It's also a pandemic is also one of the reasons, from my perspective, what we are seeing and what it's doing in the market. It's fast tracking the digitalization of the entire economy. Like Satya was mentioning, Satya Nadella, that the 3 years worth of work is getting compressed in the past in the 1 or 2 quarters, right? That is actually setting a lot of things in motion, especially. And the second one is with everywhere markets volatile and all of those aspects. So people are taking a serious look at, hey, this is one of the avenue to deploy the capital. Is another one, and the third is the fundamentals of SaaS, right? So two major metrics that play a fundamental role in SaaS: that lifetime value of a customer. So moving from a licensing model where the lifetime value is compressed to the first year of the sale and rest of the costs are distributed over AMC, that the SaaS has taken that into different realm, like LTV, right? Most of the SaaS companies underestimate LTV because in the lifetime of 7 years of an existence, the maximum lifetime of a customer would be like 5 to 6 years. As the SaaS businesses grow and mature, their lifetime value also grows. And the other metric that's amazing is the net retention rate, the trailing 12 months revenue that typical SaaS companies get from their existing customer. Salesforce typically bring anywhere between 4 to 50% of the revenue from the existing customers. For example, Chargebee, we see a 40% of existing revenue. So these are powerful metrics that are embedded in a SaaS businesses that makes the growth a standard way to progress the company. I think these two factors have attracted a lot of funding, and that's my perspective here.
Right, Manav, if I can come to you now, and I wanted to ask everyone this question actually because it is the big buzzword, right? With engineer becoming the king, legacy IT companies are facing attrition. You've got SaaS companies that are facing attrition who are so well capitalized, and everyone's throwing big bucks at engineers, right? We've heard about Superbikes, we've heard about Mercedes from HCL Tech, for example. Manav, do you want to explain to our viewers about how in demand engineers are and what maybe, some of the panelists here are having to do just to keep talent, because that is going to eat into margins as well?
Yeah, so I think if you look at it, I would call talent a short to medium term problem. If you go back in 80s in services industry, they created an entire supply system of training and universities, and they had massive campuses where people got trained in en masse. And then by early 90s and after Y2K also, I think it got solved. And now services companies at least don't face challenge at scale. So I think SaaS is in a similar position right now. I think it's just a start. I think India, we have a huge education infrastructure. What we need is a good access to education infrastructure and train people coming out of college or in the college on what SaaS is and what are the few cloud things they have to learn, and some of the courses on inside sales and product management can be done. So I think in the longer term we'll be fine. In the short term, I think there is a kind of a gold rush right now. So basically, a lot of investment is happening, I think, ahead of the curve. I think people are buying into this space because now SaaS is a secular trend. So a lot of valuation, at least in my limited opinion, are actually maybe 1 to 2 years ahead of the company's performances. But the longer term, it will even out. So I think short term, yes, there will be a pain. So it'll be good if you're an engineer. I think you are a happy man today or a happy person today. He or she can command what they want to command in the market and still learn. But I think the talent problem, all of our industry is going to work together with the education infrastructure, like services did in many ways. So I think it will get sorted out. And I think for the entrepreneurs, I think for SaaS, it is not as much about margin, but as much about growth. I think if you look at it in the current wave of SaaS, where the SaaS is, it's about, as Rajaram also mentioned, that it is about retaining the customer over a longer period of time, because the customer lifetime value for SaaS is over 7, 10, or even through the life of the company that you're dealing with, right? So it's okay to pay up initially, and then over a period of time you will make money. So your free cash flows are very high in this business, though your profitability may hurt in the shorter term. So the compensation may go up in the short term, but I think it'll level out soon.
And as this gold rush continues, of course, the SaaS companies, the big trend that has started happening is that they're building from India, for India, and for the world. Right now, you've got Freshworks and Dhruva that are looking at IPOs. That is going to be listing at the NASDAQ. The question is how to stop the SaaS companies from flipping. So the wealth generation and creation is also right here in the country. With that, I'd like to thank all my panelists for joining us here live on ET Now. The verdict is quite clear. They don't want to look at the next TCS and Wipro and Infosys. They're looking and hunting for the next Salesforce that can be built right here from India for the world. With that, we're going to take a short commercial break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.